It's time to get real with Lady Ray. Real talk, real conversation. Real people, real answers. Real talk, real conversation. So let's get real with Lady Ray.
Good evening, Nicolette. Welcome to the show, and thank you for taking time out to have this conversation with me.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So when it comes to tonight's topic, I'm more than certain that a lot of people either know someone who's been a victim, they may have been a victim themselves. Some may even be victims right now and not even know it. Others could know someone who is a catfish, or maybe they won themselves. And I'm confident, absolutely confident, if they not in any of these categories, they've watched it on TV. So
Yeah, definitely.
exactly. I'm excited to have this conversation. So I'm going to try and let us get straight into the topic because I'm excited to hear the wealth of knowledge you have to share with us. For those who may not know what catfishing is, do you just want to define what catfishing is?
You know, it's such a simple definition. It's just someone not being who they say that they are. However, there are many types of catfish. So everyone thinks that catfish came about now because of the internet, recently when the internet came about. What they don't realize is that catfish have been around forever, decades, because of the simple definition of someone who's just not who they say they are. Now, the internet has given these catfish just a better vehicle, and it's given them a name. The reality show Neve Shulman came up in 2010 with the show Catfish, and he gave them a name because of himself being catfished. And since then, it's just gone crazy. They now have a title, they now have a name, they've got a vehicle. The internet is simply an amazing tool for them to use. And I get excited by catfish. It sounds so weird. But the reason I get excited is because I like to get into their minds and get into their psyche, basically. So when you think of a catfish, especially in South Africa, people just think of these people that try and extort money from you online. But I want to get into what is a catfish and how many types there are and where do they come from, basically. Okay. So catfish using the internet, it just speeds up the process. You know, back in the day, if someone wanted to catfish you without the internet, it was mostly these guys that were either having an affair or sucked you into a whirlwind romance. Think of the fishermen that used to come on the boats, and they used to have romances with the ladies on land at their ports and their stops. You didn't know if they even had a family in another country or how many different stops type of girlfriends they had, you know. So if you had to go back and think of that and dissect it and analyze it, you can get deep into this. It's like so deep. Anyway, you know that there's real fish called catfish, like live fish called catfish, right? So back in the day, the fishermen, Alaska, they used to catch cod in Alaska and put them in vats and take them off into China. But the cod became lazy on the journey. So they actually used to put catfish into the vat with the cod to nip at them and keep them agile and thereby keep their fins fresh and nice because they wanted to also use fins. So there's a whole link with that and the name and where it came from. So basically catfish are trying to keep everyone on their toes and keep them alive, basically.
Question.
Okay, yeah.
So when you mentioned the part of putting the catfish with the cod, so when I looked at it, is it and I know this is probably not your field of expertise, but is it really a myth, or is it something that actually happens with regards to?
No, the fishermen, they had to do that, or else their cod were less of a value if the fins disintegrated on the journey, because it was a long journey from Alaska to China. So they wanted to put the catfish in with the cod to keep them agile. It's a proper, legit thing.
Okay, we just want to make sure of the validity, because sometimes we have myths and sometimes we just assume. So I just wanted to double check it. Awesome. You can continue.
Right. So, think of a sexual perpetrator in your town or the city that you live. If he had to catfish within his city in person physically, he'd very fast get a name of being a liar, and the perpetrator would come out. Now, that sexual perpetrator can become someone else online and do it freely and do it as much as he or she wants.
Yeah.
And there's a connotation that catfish are always men. It's not always the case. They are women as well. Sometimes they're teenagers too. So catfish, a broad term, are generally very vulnerable people with a lot of insecurities. I've dealt with a 21-year-old lady who's come forward and confessed to being a catfish, and she's likened it to an addiction. Okay, so if you think of a drug, alcohol addiction, it's something that they feel they can't control. She has spent 8 years creating fake profiles all over social media and catfished so many people. All right, so like people who turn to substance abuse or use harmful coping tools, right? She says that catfishing becomes an escape from her real life. That's kind of sad. Okay, she didn't have any friends in her real life. She had textbook child abuse from her father. Her mother was a drug addict. She wanted to be anyone else but herself. All right, so she also talks about qualities that became an obsession for her. She likens catfishing to an obsession for her. She creates these elaborate profiles that are just a fictional character of a version that she always wanted to be.
Nicolette, what you've just described could very well be the types of people, or one particular type of person who would become a catfish. So would it be safe to say that catfish is a form of escapism?
Definitely, 100%, for the most part. Okay, so let's look at now what motivates them to catfish. We've got money, okay? Money, which extorting money from someone, it could be locally, but most of the time it is overseas and typically out of Nigeria or Ghana. They create the fake personas, fake profiles, and fake storylines. Their whole life is a storyline, and you don't even know anything, So we've got friendship. Now there comes the catfish, the type of catfish you're just talking about. Some people want friendship. They're lonely. Now, especially all the lockdowns we've been having, Corona has accelerated this whole catfish process. Everyone's been isolated at home and lonely, so they've turned online to look for friendships. Then you've got the person who's got a ton of insecurities, who sees someone like you online and thinks, oh, she will never become a friend of mine. I have to create this fake person to become her friend, just to have someone to talk to. Okay, then you've got the romance. They're looking for the romance. So a catfish, most of the time, desires genuine, true love. We're not talking about the money extortion catfish. We're talking about the lonely, the insecure catfish. They're looking for love, closeness, but they don't feel confident enough to put themselves forward. Now, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it comes with the different stages and different levels. The third level of Maslow's hierarchy is a need that needs to be met, a need to be seen, loved, admired. It's a need. You need food, shelter, and air. You will go to any lengths to meet that need at that first level of food, for example. So like the same with the third need in Maslow's hierarchy. You need to meet it. So you will go to any lengths to meet that need. So that's much deeper into it. And then you've got obviously trickery. Okay, so you've got a narcissist example, a narcissistic ex that wants to still keep tabs on you somehow. They will create a fake persona and get you online and just monitor you and see what's going on in your life. That's another one. And then we've got a dangerous type, perversion type. Now that's where they want to, they might have a sick perversion of sexual addiction, pornography, and pedophilia. This is the type that's very closely linked to human trafficking, and this is the type we worry about a lot. Okay, so they will just want photos. They will create this relationship and want photos from especially young girls, unsuspecting young girls. So yeah, so this is the type we worry about, and you should be cautioned, and there's got to contact the police, obviously.
Now that we understand the different types of catfishing, we've gotten to understand the psyche somewhat of the catfish, depending on what type of catfishing. The psyche seems to vary. You have answered the fact that catfishing is not gender specific. Before we get to the victim side of this conversation, are there any visible character traits that we as people who are on the internet, on social media, can look out for that will be warning signs that this is a potential catfish?
Okay. Now you must remember, we're going to talk about the general one that hits South Africa a lot. Okay. That's the one to get money from the guys in Nigeria or Ghana. These are catfishing teams, right? We call them Yahoo boys sometimes because they sit in an internet cafe. There's probably about 5 or 6 of them, and they're all sitting with laptops or computers in front of themselves, and they're working together. So you think that you're talking to John for 2 or 3 months, and it's text messages and emails going backwards and forwards. However, you could be talking to 4 or 5 different individuals. So John will email you, his friend will call you, his friend will send you the text messages. And they work together. Some people call them a syndicate. We call them teams. It's very calculated. They have like whiteboards up in the room to keep track of all the lies of their lives, their fake lives that they've created, so they don't lose track. Sometimes they do. So that's a sign. When things start not making sense, hang on, you know, something doesn't add up here. They've slipped up and they've missed the beat, or the friend hasn't communicated with the other friend properly and they've missed a beat.
Okay, no, so I think validated, it's in terms of being vigilant, in terms of how the information is shared between you and the person on the other.
Yeah, the flow of the story, you know, like how does it flow? Another thing you need to look out for is the way in which they talk. Most of the time they say English is their first language. They most of the time in the UK or the USA, and they'll give an arbitrary town in the UK. They love the UK for some reason.
Okay.
They will always make it a place or a way that's they unavailable to you. They just can't video call you. Mm-hmm. They can never video call you, and they'll make it some excuse that they are this high exec CEO of a company, they're too busy, they just can't do it, or they're in a remote part of some country in America that there's just no signal. They just can't, they don't have Wi-Fi, or their phones have broken, the camera's not working. You know, but their English, the way in which they string along their English is just not of a first language speaker. Okay. You know, and they love using the word, and then I've picked this up myself, as I said, catfish excite me, so I've dealt with a lot of them. And they use the word am for A-M. And they like to say, am feeling good today. Instead of I am. They just use am. And one way I like to test, and I know I shouldn't, but I like to test, am I speaking to a Nigerian, is I will ask in their lingo, how far now, bros? You just type it in and ask, and immediately
Okay.
And immediately they will answer in their local lingo immediately. And you know, bam, got them. Figured.
I have a question. You may not want to go there, and we may have to edit this out. Why do I get the feeling you have either almost been a victim, may have been a victim, may just do this for the excitement of finding out how quickly you can catch them out? What's happening here?
Okay, so I've had so many clients that have been catfished and left destitute and heartbroken. And you see the suffering is real. It's real. It's like heartbreaking stuff to see. Of course, people have attempted tons of weekly. It happens weekly. These attempts, catfishing attempts. And before life got busy and before I became a mom, I used to love stringing them along and catfishing them back to see how far it would go before they ask for money. You know it's going to end up asking for money. And that's another thing. They usually ask for very small amounts at first. They'll ask you for airtime or just a $20, that they need to see how willing you are to part with your money. And if you are willing a few times to part with $10, $20, the big bucks are coming, definitely. But it takes 2 to 3 months before the big bucks request. However, their profession of love to you will come after 2 weeks. They will profess love to you. And very shortly after, they will even want to get engaged. They will want you to be their fiance. They need that commitment from you before the big bucks come, the big bucks request come.
Okay.
So even without video calling, they want that commitment.
That was going to be my question. They proposing marriage to somebody that they just have spoken to via text, not even an audio call. But based on that, what goes on? And you may have alluded to it earlier, but I just want us to unpack the psyche behind this. What goes on in somebody's mind when they make a conscious decision to potentially ruin the life of another human? Because you made a statement earlier to say that you have clients who have come in destitute. They've lost everything. I've read of a few stories and I interviewed a few people in prep for today's conversation. What goes on in the psyche of this person when they decide, I am going to take every last cent, I am going to ruin this person emotionally as well? What's going on in this person's mind?
Okay, the catfish have been trained. They go through hectic training to psychologically abuse a victim. Okay, and it's sad that they prey on the vulnerable people. So, example, they always use the dating sites, Tinder and I don't even know what the dating sites are today, but these social media things. If you've recently been divorced, you're going to be on a dating site. If you're single, you're going to be on a dating site. They prey on especially the people that are divorced or have lost a loved one, and they're in that grieving transition period where they are most vulnerable, and that's when they attack and that's when they hit. So they're looking for these people that are, the everlasting romantic type of personality. They're always looking for that fairy tale romance. Those are ideal victims, because they're always in search of that. And these guys come on and they play Mr. Perfect. So in psychology, we have a trick we use, paraphrasing with your clients, to help them realize that we understand what they're talking about. And this is what these guys do. So these guys get information from you about your life, and they want to know about your family. And then they paraphrase the information back to you in a different way. And you think, oh, he gets me. He gets my world like no one else gets me. You've just given him all the information. He's just giving it back to you, And then people who are very neurotic, get anxious, high anxiety people in depression, a deep state of depression. They target those. These guys are smart, or I should say their training is smart. They work on the art of manipulation. Also these people that are sensation seeking people, they're looking for these extreme feelings and the fame and the passion, and it's just these high doses of different feelings and emotions. People thrive on that sometimes, and these are the people that are victims as well. People with addictive personalities also, those are victims. And then obviously codependent personalities. You always need someone to need you and love you. Those are also. And then, as I mentioned before, women and middle-aged women, the older woman. And that's why, especially there's not too much being aired or spoken about in South Africa. It's always the American part that's talking about the catfish, but it's always these older women with the Yahoo boys in Nigeria, because they are the victims.
When you say older women, it almost feels like the women are always the victims and the men are always the perpetrators. It may be a generalization, but I watched a movie, and you may have watched it, and maybe those viewing may have also watched it, called A Fall from Grace. And there is a particular scene in the movie where the perpetrator says to the woman who he's now married, "Women your age are easy. You guys are low-hanging fruit." So based on that statement that I've just made, and that is just a quote from the movie, it's not my own, do you think that victims make themselves easy targets by airing both their emotional and physical lives all over social media? And when it does go pear-shaped, they choose not to take responsibility for the part that they played in perpetuating the fact that they could be catfished.
See, now this is not an easy answer. It's very difficult. The reason is, from my point of view, being in the psych field, it's not as simple as that. Okay, so we go deeper, we go into childhood emotions that have caused her or him to need this validation and to need and seek out this attention. It depends, if she's going to be totally, or he's going to be totally naive about the situation and just make bad decisions, then it could boil down to what other bad decisions have they made in their life. It's just another one of those bad decisions. Then, of course, from our side, we have to look into it. I won't say that the catfish is always only to blame. It's not the case. You need to have security measures in place on your side also. Don't be naive. But think of the internet, and when the internet came about, if you're going to take a 60-year-old lady or 70-year-old lady now, the internet is fairly new-ish to them, or they don't know how to work it properly. They are putting their credit card details all over with no security measures in place. If this guy tells her, "I just need your security account, your banking account detail number to put money into your account," she's going to believe it and give it to him, not knowing that he can ransack her account just with that number.
So another question that has become synonymous with catfishing is, how on earth could he or she be so gullible, so naive, to just fall for all the lies? I'm sure you've heard that statement maybe from the families of the victims. How do you answer that, or how do you speak to that?
Most of the victims feel alone. They're just looking for attention, love, friends, validation. So I would ask the family, where have they been in terms of support and offering to fulfill those needs from the family's point of view? Why is this person feeling so alone?
Yeah.
There's got to be reasons for it. And I know it's easy for a person on the outside of the catfish relationship to say, oh my gosh, that's just stupidity. It's plain to see, it's in front of you. But have they gone to the extent of proving with proof, like just get proof on the internet, paint the road or paint the picture for the victim clearly, and paint the picture for them that's in plain sight and plain to see, that they can't be fooled. They're not caught up in this whirlwind of romance and a wonderful world. If you can just show them and say, look, they have requested this from you. Look, they can't video call you right now. Why? Or they were just in your town on business 50 kilometers away. Why couldn't they stop by? Look at, and they will say they've studied at this university. Do research, check if there was ever a person registered at that university. They will say their parents are always dying in car crashes. Oh my gosh, that happens all the time. Their parents are dying in car crashes. Okay. Get the dates of when that happened. Check news, check history. Did a bad accident happen then? It will be somewhere in the news in the country, somewhere, find that out. They're very elaborate stories, and they always rich guys that have amazing jobs and stuff like that. So just check it out. Check the company that he says he owns. Check it out. Is it legit? Is it real? Get an address. Get onto Google Earth and Google that address and check if what you can see on Google Earth.
Wow. Just hearing all of that just overwhelmed me to think that in the day and age that we live in, and I don't know if it's to say to find somebody to spend the rest of your life with, or to get into a relationship, or even to obtain friendship, seems like such hard work. I mean, it's not like before. Somebody would just come up to you and say, can I have your number now? And, can we go out for coffee? Now it's about, can I check if your story is legitimate? Can I see if you really exist? But I hear you saying all these things, about what the catfish does. And I have this feeling, and it may not go down well, and I have to ask the question, do we almost seem to negate the responsibility? I'm going back there. Do we feel like we negate the responsibility of the victim because it seems like the perpetrator put so much work in, there's no way you could think that he was going to be a catfish or a con artist, and victims just sit in the victim seat, take no responsibility. We have sympathy parties for them. At what point do we say, Mr. Victim, Mrs. Victim, can you take accountability? Can we look into the psyche of the victim and say, what's there that needs to be adjusted? What do we need to speak to in the psyche of the victim so that they take ownership and they don't continue doing this?
Okay, so from the victim's point of view, that moment does come. Okay, but it's a healing process. It doesn't come immediately. And people who are talking to the victim or family members, you are not going to see that moment happen. But sitting in therapy, like with myself, I know it's a journey, and I do see that moment hit, and it hits a long time after. The reason is they need to first get over the initial shock of their world being rocked and their world being broken because the love of their life is not real now. It's some teenage boy sitting in the middle of Nigeria. Like, that's a hard concept. The person you've loved and trusted for so many months, it's a very hard concept to accept. You have loved this person. You've fallen in love with them.
So Nicolette, are you telling me, okay, as naive I may sound, there are people who fall in love with somebody that they have just spoken to via text and they have just seen images of, and they need counseling thereafter because they have life commitment to somebody that they've never physically, tangibly seen?
It's easy. It's so easy to, or you deal with these people. I mean, years ago, my first client that came, I was in your spot sitting and thinking, are you kidding me? Like, really? But the more you deal with them and the more you unpack why and how and where, it becomes so real. You get into their world, you begin to understand their world, and there are tons. Now, the reason why we don't hear too much about it publicly, like normally, it's embarrassing when their world crumbles. And like what you've just said, you've fallen in love with a picture and a voice, it's really embarrassing for them to admit that to family and friends. They probably are not going to. They probably won't admit it. So they never will take responsibility or acknowledge, because it's humiliating. A grown, successful 60-something-year-old woman, and this happens to her. How humiliating is that, for it to become public knowledge that she was scammed by a 17-year-old in an internet cafe in another country that can't even talk English properly?
So you used a word there, they don't take responsibility. So is there a possibility, okay, because you've not taken responsibility for what happened, is there a possibility that it can happen again because you have this belief that it didn't really happen, it was just a once-off and I'm still going to find love? Have you met people who've been catfished more than once? I'm afraid.
Right. So I've dealt with people who have not only been catfished more than once, they've been catfished more than once by the same person.
No.
Okay. Right. So how that happens is you have busted their story, okay? Yes. And you come out and you say, listen, John, I know for a fact that you are scamming me and da-da-da-da-da, and this is the story. And he admits it and he says, okay, yes, baby, you've busted me and I still love you. And as sure as anything, he's going to just create a different persona and a different fake personality and continue to scam you. And you sitting there thinking, yeah, I've busted him. I've now got the real person. Now I've got the real one. You have not. He's just flipped the switch and carried on.
Wow. So on your website, you make the statement, I only delve into a person's past if it significantly helps that person understand and master those habits, feelings, and thoughts that hold them back from achieving their most important goals. When exploring the mind behind catfishing, both victim and perpetrator, do you think it is necessary to delve into their past?
But in a case like this, you have to delve into the past, because it goes deeper now into the inner child. What happened to that little child inside that has stuck and stayed into adulthood that still needs attention or needs fixing? So we need to go back and fix that inner child. So example, you would go back to the very first moment that little girl felt unseen or unheard or not enough attention, that the moment she felt it, not the moment that it happened, the moment she felt it. Or the moment at school with a bullying incident, when that child felt so embarrassed and humiliated that it made them go into a shell and become an introvert. We need to go back there and fix that in the inner child, so that the adult doesn't still feel those feelings and needs and have those needs. So yes, there is time and space and opportunity where we have to go back to childhood.
Okay, so what we're saying is that like many perpetrators on different avenues, whether they murderers or rapists, what happens to them as children affects the way they grow into adults and behave as adults. So both victim and perpetrator seem to just try to fix what happened to me when I was a child in the virtual world. Bearing in mind that this statement has potential to be labeled as a generalization, society has a tendency to oversympathize and empathize with the victim of catfishing and brutally crucify the perpetrator. Is it always the perpetrator's fault? Or should the victim victims also be held accountable for their lack of vigilance?
Well, I think that once the victim realizes that, hey, something's amiss here, they need to sit and ask themselves, but why did it happen to me? Why me? They need to look at either inwardly or outwardly. Have they just been too much of a giver in society and someone took the opportunity to just cash in on that? Have they been too naive? Have they not had their guard up or their walls up enough? As I say, is there security measures online in place? Do they have excellent antivirus programs and stuff like that? They need to look at why them? And they will come up with an answer. They need to address it or fix it or get help, like most of them come to us, get help for that, So it's not always the perpetrator's fault, not always. Although, yeah, society paints it as mostly the perpetrator. But the victim needs to take responsibility for themselves to sort that out. So as you say, it doesn't happen again, because it's very easy to happen again. It's quite easy.
I discover that I'm a victim and I turn a page and I'm a victim again. And when does the cycle end, But what measures can individuals take to prevent themselves from becoming victims? Not just the measures that you place on your social media, but from your profession. What advice do you give people? How do they guard their emotions? How do they build their confidence? What can they do as individuals to guard themselves from becoming victims?
Well, let's say you've been a victim once. Most of the time, they have to be a victim once in order to make them realize that there's a problem. Okay, and let's hope and pray that that once is all it takes for them to wake up and want to face the reality of what's happening in their lives. And unfortunately, they have to reach a breaking point at that one time, whether it's your heart that's broken or your bank account that's broken, but there needs to reach a breaking point for them to rise up again. Now, a person, how they have to safeguard themselves is check out or talk with a professional about your self-esteem levels. Do you feel that you can walk into a room and own it? Do you have enough self-esteem? Do you feel that you are valuable? Your place in this world has value. That's a big one. And that's where it all stems down to self-esteem and value. How much do you value yourself? And if you don't, where does it come from? Go back and find a professional to talk to about it and unpack it and deal with it. I can tell you, there's such a negative connotation to psychology and counseling, and they feel it's only sick people that need it. It's not like that. 80% of society should have someone to talk to. We all need someone to talk to and unpack stuff, even if you're just bouncing ideas or thoughts off them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. We should. Today's world is tough. We all should have one.
So basically what we're saying is that to prevent yourself from being catfished, delve inward, and if you feel that there's something that doesn't make you feel 100% comfortable, speak to someone. So before I say goodnight, thank you so much for your time and the privilege and the honor that I've had to speak to you. This is a vast topic, and I think we have just touched the tip of the iceberg. But if there's somebody watching who is either a victim or a perpetrator and would like to start the process of healing, and yes, I called it healing because it's a sickness. Nobody is born to hurt other people. So if they want to start this journey, what can they do?
Well, firstly, if it's a very serious case, a catfishing case that involves sextortion and blackmail with pictures and stuff online, or human trafficking, just go to the police immediately. Don't even waste your time. Just get there, get protection immediately. Now, with the other types of catfishing, the more light, we call it the light catfishing, you can get some counseling. There's a lot of free services we have in South Africa. And I actually myself very recently found a resource online. Go to opencounseling.com, okay? And that's with a single L, not a double L. It's like an American spelling of counseling, opencounseling.com. I realized they list this website. I don't know who owns the website. I don't, but they list every single free resource we have in this country, and you can actually enter your area code to check what's around you and what's in your vicinity. It's such a useful tool. So I would go there and check what's around you, your free counseling services that you have around you, and take advantage of it and use it. Just go and talk to someone. And then those that are in a position or want more private care and private sessions, you are most welcome to contact us at LifePsych. We've got online counselors, we've got satellite offices in Vanderbilt Park as well as Belito. So yeah, contact us. We sure can help in a lot of different areas.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicolette, for joining us.